There's some bad news on GPU pricing right now, but there's also some good deals out there. And I'll also talk about what about Black Friday if you're watching this video before Black Friday. Anyway, the bad news is the RTX 4090, which was honestly already out of most people's budget range anyway, but maybe some people were thinking about picking one up around Black Friday or for Christmas, something like that. The prices have shot up to over $2,000 on the cheapest models new right now. This is likely something to do with the restrictions on GPU sales for AI-related reasons to China, and that could be what's driving this up. So I'll hope to see that these go back down, but again, we'll have to wait and see. I should also mention there's a lot of rumors right now about Nvidia refreshing their 40 series with a super version, with announcements coming in January, but this is still in the rumor phase. And the biggest question on those would be, if they do happen, what do they do to the pricing of the current models? Because Nvidia could just slot them in above the current model pricing, and then maybe it doesn't really offer you any better value, but it is possible they will push prices down. And the rumor is super refreshes on cards like the 4070, 4070 Ti, and 4080. So if you're looking at that price range, it is possible that holding out until like Q1 of next year could end up netting you better value in that range. But again, we don't know for sure. That is just rumors. Now, today's video, I'm going to take you through every single GPU price range and explain what my pick would be for the best value and why, showing you benchmarks and everything to back that up. But I'm going to be focusing on pricing new. And honestly, sometimes the best deals are found in the used market. And today's sponsor, Jawa.gg, is definitely something to check out. Look at the pinned comment or the link in my video description. You can sell your GPU here to help fund your upgrade. A lot of people leave value on the table when they're doing that. But you can also buy entire pre-built systems here, and again, get a lot of used value. You can buy used GPUs. Like I said, a lot of value there. Right now, they have TechTuber gift guides that you could take a look at. This is pretty cool. You can go ahead and look through their picks for, best pre-built for $1,000, best pre-built for $500, best gift for a gamer under $150. A lot of cool stuff to take a look at here. As well as I noticed at the top of their page, they're running an $1,800 gaming PC giveaway. So take a look at that. If we click this thing, this PC looks excellent. It's a 4070 Ti and an Ryzen 5 7600X CPU that will crush the latest games and be on a highly upgradable platform with that CPU and look awesome while doing it. So again, definitely follow the link in the pinned comment and video description to take a look at Jawa.gg. Again, sell your old hardware to fund your upgrade, buy used to stretch your budget, all sorts of awesome stuff, and they'll also be running some great Black Friday deals. Now, let's jump into our stuff, and well, I was talking about 4090 pricing a minute ago. That's way outside of most people's budget. A lot of people are going to be buying in the $200, $300, $400 price range, so let's start around $200. If you have around $200 to spend, I think you should buy an RX 6650 XT. Now, these cost $230 right now. Now, why am I recommending this? Well, it's going to perform very similarly to cards like the RX 7600, but those cost $260. That's also an AMD GPU, and there's not really much of a feature difference between the generations other than an AV1 encoder, which might matter if you're streaming to YouTube or doing certain kinds of content creation, but if you're just playing games, that's not going to be, that big of a deal. Now, the RTX 4060 from Nvidia would offer you better ray tracing performance and a better upscaler with DLSS. But they cost $290, and its overall rasterized non-ray trace performance is not much better than that 6650 XT for $230. Now, again, DLSS is attractive here, and that will boost performance at 1080p. I'd rather try to avoid upscaling at all. If you are going to be upscaling, again, maybe pay extra money for that NVIDIA GPU, but that is a lot of extra money if you're down around the $200 price range. Now, if you're struggling to hit $200, you can't go over it to get to that $230. The RX 6600 is $190 right now on the cheapest models. That is below $200. And if you can't go over $200, this would be my pick. You could compare it to cards from Intel at this price range, like the A750, which is $206 right now. These are going to perform fairly similarly in a lot of cases. However, Intel GPUs still tend to be more inconsistent on just having some games that just don't run well, especially around launch. Starfield is still in a pretty bad state on Intel GPUs and didn't run at all at launch. The Last of Us Part 1 it didn't run well or even boot the game at launch. Like, these still happen. Their software has been getting much better. And you could also even consider the A580, which launched recently from Intel, which will be a bit weaker, but around $170, there is some value to be had there. But I think the more consistent experience makes sense on the RX 6600 here, and that would be my pick if I had to buy under $200. Does NVIDIA have anything competing here? Well, the RTX 3050, that's about $207. The main attraction there would be the better upscaler, which can, again, boost performance at some cost to image quality, but less of a cost to image quality than FSR2 upscaling. But again, if you just have a little higher performance overall, maybe you don't need that upscaling. And I don't think the NVIDIA ray tracing advantage means much at this performance tier, because you'd be more likely to be turning off settings like ray tracing and turning down other graphic settings to improve your performance, rather than turning on ray tracing, for that visual quality. I think, anyway, that would be my recommendation at this performance tier. So I'm gonna go with the 6650 XT, and if you can't afford that, probably the 6600. Now, if we're gonna jump up more to the $300-ish price range, again, NVIDIA's sitting there with the 4060 at $290. Now, the problem with this is that the 6700 XT can be had for $310. So that is $20 more, but you get 12 gigabytes of VRAM instead of 8. And as well as just flat out more raw performance, especially when you're not ray tracing. And again, I think we're still at a performance tier where you'd be more likely to be turning down settings like ray tracing to increase your frame rates, rather than cranking the ray tracing settings heavily, where yes, the NVIDIA card might perform better in that case, but it probably just wouldn't be the recommended optimized way to play the game in the first place. I do like the NVIDIA upscaler, but again, the 6700 XT has so much more performance that it might, the NVIDIA card might take upscaling just to match the performance versus actually, taking a lead using it. And again, 12 gigabytes of VRAM versus 8. How much does that matter? Well, the latest games are designed for current gen consoles, which have 16 gigabytes of unified memory, and so often the highest graphic settings and textures will use more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and that can affect your performance. Now, you can simply turn down some graphic settings to stay within your VRAM buffer, but it would be nicer not to have to do that, especially for things like textures, which don't generally affect your performance if you have enough VRAM. So the 6700 XT to me is definitely worth the $20 over the 4060. Now, what if we were going to move up to another pricing tier from here? Well, let's go up to around the $400 price point. Here, I think AMD again, and don't worry, this video is not going to be entirely AMD recommendations, but at these more value-oriented price points, I think there's a lot to be said for the amount of VRAM and performance they're offering at the same price. Anyway, at $400-ish, the RX 6800 non-XT version offers you 16 gigabytes of VRAM at $390 and more performance than the closest NVIDIA competitors. The closest price competitors are the 4060 Ti 8GB and 16GB versions. The 8GB version is currently available as low as $370, which is $20 less than the cheapest 6800, but $20 is not a massive price gap. I think somebody considering these two cards would be considering both, and for that extra $20, you are doubling your VRAM. 8 gigabytes of VRAM for $370 just feels like a bad deal right now for the reasons stated earlier, as well as the fact that the 6800 just is a faster GPU. So again, where that kind of takes into account that DLSS advantage, right? If you'd kick on DLSS, well, it gets you more performance at some cost to image quality. But again, is that just getting you to catch up to the performance of the 6800 without using that, right? And I still think we're at a performance tier where I would be using limited to no ray tracing for performance reasons, especially if we're trying to use these cards at 1440p. Now, there is the 16 gigabyte version of the 4060 Ti, and thank goodness it is significantly better value now than when it launched at $500. It's now down to $430, so it is now $40 more than the RX 6800's cheapest model, and it gets you the same VRAM, which is nice, but it's not any faster than the 8 gigabyte version, meaning it is still a slower graphics card compared to the 6800 for $40 more. So I just don't think it makes a lot of sense at that, at that price. So here my pick would still be the 6800. So now you're probably like, this guy's just an AMD shill. He's going to do nothing but recommend AMD GPUs. And that is not the case, because if we jump up to the $500 price point, I recommend you buy the RTX 4070. The cheapest models available are now $520. When the RTX 4070 launched at $600, this was a much harder sell. But with AMD offering competition with the 7800 XT, which came in at a $500 MSRP and is available at that price, it generally offers a little bit better performance than the RTX 4070 when you're not using ray tracing. However, on average, it's maybe, 5 or 6% faster. It's not that big of a deal. They perform very similarly. But when you are using heavy ray tracing workloads, the 4070 will catch up or even sometimes significantly surpass the performance of the 7800 XT. And we are now at a performance tier where if you're at 1080p, I think you definitely can be and probably should be using ray tracing to boost your visual experience. You have the headroom to do it on the 4070. At 1440p, if you're using DLSS, you might have the performance headroom to use some levels of ray tracing on the 4070. It might actually make a lot of sense, especially when you're using DLSS. And so, in other words, for $20 more, you're getting a lot more ray tracing performance, a much better upscaler, which at 1440p, I would definitely think using DLSS quality is going to be what most people would choose to do, and FSR2 quality just will look a little bit more pixelated, less temporally stable, have just more visual quality issues with it. And again, their baseline performance without ray tracing is still very similar. So I would gladly pay the extra $20 to get the 4070 over the 7800 XT. And, I think that just makes sense. Now, yes, the 7800 XT has 4 more gigabytes of VRAM. We are talking 16 gigabytes of VRAM versus 8 gigabytes, not 8, 12 gigabytes of VRAM on the 4070, and that 12 makes all the difference compared to the 8 gigabyte cards we were talking about earlier. 12 gigabytes of VRAM is enough in almost all situations right now to max games out at 1440p. There's some cases where you're right on that borderline and you might spill over that 12 gigabytes of VRAM. But if you turn down a setting or two or use DLSS, that also can reduce that. And in general, I think 12 gigabytes is a good amount for 1440p and a great amount for 1080p gaming for probably the next several years. Does that mean I'm guaranteeing you will max out literally every graphic setting in every single game? Maybe not. But I think with realistic settings that you'd be playing at anyway, plus DLSS quality, I think 12 gigabytes is absolutely fine at this price point. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. So the RTX 4070 is my $500 pick. You could keep your eye on 6800 XT versions, which occasionally get discounted. I am seeing $470 right now for a 6800 XT. Which for the most part is basically almost as fast as a 7800 XT. They're very similar GPUs, a little bit less energy efficient. Doesn't have the AV1 encoder, things like that. But I think the 4070 still makes the most sense in this price range. But if you can't quite go to 520, maybe that 6800 XT might make a little bit more sense there. Now, if we go past this point, I really don't think there's very good value available at all. That doesn't mean you can't buy there. You just don't feel good about pretty much any of the purchases, and I'm hoping that Black Friday deals might change that. Again, stay tuned to my channel for both my community page posts on deals, as well as if there are a lot of good deals available around Black Friday, I'll probably do videos on the topic as well. If we go past this price point, you go up to the 4070 Ti, which I am very much hoping will get replaced with the 4070 Ti Super or something like that, that either has more VRAM or more performance or both or a lower price, hopefully all three. Because the problem with the 4070 Ti is that, okay, it launched at $800. You can find them for $770 right now. It's 12 gigabytes of VRAM. And like I said, I'm not too concerned about 12 gigabytes of VRAM right now, especially if you're below 4K resolution. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't any issues with it. And you're paying almost $800 for a graphics card. It feels really bad to only get 12 gigabytes of VRAM for that price. So that is a concern with this. Also, this is a lot more money than a 4070 non-Ti, considering how much the 4070 non-Ti price has dropped. $520 versus $770. Yes, you do get more performance, but you don't get any more VRAM, and you pay a lot more money to get there. Now, the AMD competitor at this price point is the 7900 XT, not the XTX. Lowest price models are about $740 right now. And my main problem with these is I still think they're kind of overpriced compared to cards like the 4070 and the 7800 XT. Now, the 7900 XT at least doesn't have the VRAM concern because it does offer 20 gigabytes of VRAM, which is absolutely plenty, shouldn't be any kind of issue. It offers a little bit more rasterized performance for a little bit less money than the 4070 Ti, but now we are at a performance tier where I think ray tracing can very much make sense, in which case the 4070 Ti will be at least as fast in light ray tracing workloads or a lot faster in heavier ray tracing workloads. So it really makes me just feel not good about either of these GPUs. Like I said, we've already seen Prime Day bring the 7900 XT down as low as $699. And so if we see pricing like that around Black Friday, then it might be something that I could more comfortably recommend. That being said, if you have $800 budget to spend on your graphics card, then you don't always just have to buy something that is good value, because these cards are better than the 4070 and the 7800 XT. They're just not better, performance per dollar, if that makes sense. So if I had to pick a card around this, $700 to $800 price point between the 7900 XT and the 4070 Ti, I think if I was gaming at 4K, I might choose the 7900 XT, because at 4K resolution, I really would rather have more than 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which is 7900 XT offers. Also at 4K resolution, it's going to be harder to use ray tracing because it is just more demanding on the GPUs. So I might be more likely to turn off or turn down ray tracing settings anyway, diminishing one of the NVIDIA advantages. And at 4K resolution, FSR doesn't get beaten as badly image quality wise when you're using it, because you have a higher base pixel count. So if I was using like FSR2 quality versus DLSS quality, at 4K resolution, I still think DLSS does a better job, but it's less noticeable than at the lower resolutions. So I think the NVIDIA advantages are diminished at that resolution, and so I might lean towards the 7900 XT at that price point. At that resolution at this price point. If I was buying for 1440p, in that case, I might be more likely to use ray tracing, and I'm less concerned about the 12 gigabytes of VRAM, although I'm still not real happy about it, in which case I might lean a little more towards the 4070 Ti for that NVIDIA feature set. The upscaling I do think looks better at that resolution, and more noticeably so, and again, more likely to use ray tracing. Now, past this point, if we would move up to the RTX, the first GPU we would hit price-wise is the 7900 XTX. These are the lowest models, $950 right now. I've seen them lower, so I'm hoping these ones go on sale and become a more compelling value. The closest performance and price competitor here is the RTX 4080, where the cheapest models are about $1,060. That means it's only about a 100-ish dollar price gap between the cheapest models. And if you're already spending nearly $1,000, you know, this is basically plus or minus 50 off of $1,000 price point, these GPUs perform very similarly when you're not ray tracing, maybe a small advantage to the 7900 XTX, but they're really very close. But when you are ray tracing, where again, especially if you're at 1440p resolution, I think the 4080 absolutely has ray tracing performance that you'd probably use along with, I just think it makes sense along with the better upscaler. I would definitely pay the extra, you know, if you want to call it at $1,000, $100 is only 10% price, right? You know what I mean? So I would definitely go with the 4080 over the 7900 XTX if they are within $100 of each other. So if you're at $1,000 plus or minus 50, I would definitely go plus 50 instead of minus 50 to get the extra feature set, ray tracing performance, better upscaler, frame generation that's available in more games, and at this point in time, a little bit more compatible with things like variable refresh rate and things like that. Just makes sense. Now, past this point, you're at the RTX 4090, which literally doubles the GPU price to $2,000 because of what I said at the beginning of the video. Prices on these have gone way up, which means that, well, it used to be the case that if you're already buying a 4080, you might consider stretching to that 4090. At this point, it's $2,000. It is significantly better than a 4080 and a 7900 XTX. It is the best GPU on the market. But with what's happened to its pricing right now, I really just say, look, if your budget, a lot of people's incomes are in very different places. Many people can comfortably spend $2,000 on a graphics card, and their only question is like, well, if it's not really noticeably better than a 4080, I'll save the $1,000, but like financially I can handle this just fine. I'm not going into debt. It's just like whatever. I have the money. I just don't want to waste it. Well, it is noticeably better than a 4080. It's literally double the price at current pricing though. So, really consider if you want that extra performance, but the 4090 is a impressive GPU. It's just its value is much worse right now than it used to be. I used to be able to find them around $1,500 to $1,600. This is, made it a little bit hard to recommend. Anyway, again, if you're buying in the higher end of all of this, especially looking at cards like the 4070 Ti or the 4080, like I said, Q1 of next year, the rumors point to there being super versions of those cards, which I hope offer better performance per dollar and maybe more VRAM on the 4070 Ti Super. So we'll go ahead and, have to wait and see on that. So to summarize today's video, if you're buying at the lower price ranges, ray tracing is a bit less compelling, and AMD is generally offering more performance and sometimes VRAM at the same price points, where I think AMD makes a lot of sense at the lower performance tiers. If you're buying around $200, but you have to be under $200, I think the 6600 non-XT makes a lot of sense at $190. If you can spend more than $200, the 6650 XT at $230 gets you most of the performance of a 7600 or a 4060, but for noticeably less money. Although you do lose out on some features like AV1 encoding and some NVIDIA features with DLSS, things like that. We already talked about that. If you go up to the $300 price range, I think the 6700 XT version makes a lot of sense because you jump up to 12 gigabytes of VRAM and a lot more performance than a 4060 for just a little bit more money. At the $400-ish price point, the 6800 from AMD, again, it's a little under $400, and it offers 16 gigabytes of VRAM and a lot of performance, more performance than the 4060 Ti, which is its NVIDIA competitor. It also performs very similarly to AMD's new 7700 XT, but for significantly less money, and it has more VRAM. You just lose out on the AV1 encoder. So the 6800 is my $400 pick. My $500 pick, we're finally getting into some NVIDIA recommendations. My $500 pick is the RTX 4070 because it performs very similarly to a 7800 XT, but with more performance in ray tracing and similar performance when you're not ray tracing, a better upscaler, a better and more implemented frame generator, better power efficiency, all sorts of reasons why I would pay the extra 20 bucks for the 4070. Past this point, I don't really recommend anything from a value perspective, but if you have to choose an $800-ish GPU, I think the 7900 XT might make the most sense at 4K resolution for the extra VRAM, and you're being less likely to use ray tracing, but at 1440p, I might still buy the 4070 Ti because I'm less concerned about the 12 gigabyte VRAM issue, and I am more likely to be using ray tracing, and DLSS at lower resolutions does look more noticeably, better. That brings us to the 4080. Which is my next recommendation. If you're buying around $1,000, the 4080 is a better graphics card than the 7900 XTX. And again, you're talking plus or minus 50 off of $1,000 budget range. And I would definitely pay that. It does end up being $100 more, but I would pay that for the 4080 at that price point. Past this, you could buy a 4090 for $2,000. It's a really good graphics card and there's nothing else as good, but that's a lot of money. Anyway, I don't know why I'm suddenly on $8,000 graphics cards right now, but anyway, there's always the professional GPUs if you just want to spend more money for some reason. Anyway, that's today's roundup. Definitely stay tuned for to the channel for Black Friday updates. And again, take a look at the used market, Jawa.gg offering some great deals. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.